But I missed it when you were like, the companies that are doing these three things are the companies that are leading. So content, technology, and
business. Yeah, so I think that, and to me, I heard this really fascinating commentary at Digital Hollywood a month ago or whatever it was. It was a VC panel, and one of the guys on it was comparing Silicon Valley to LA. And my instinct when you make that comparison is that Silicon Valley is going to be the more strategic, the more regimented business world, whereas LA is going to be the more free-form, fun, what's cool and interesting. And his comment was, from a VC perspective, it's exactly the opposite. The LA companies are much more regimented and strategic about having a revenue stream at the end of their innovation. And the Silicon Valley ones are the ones that come up with something new and cool, and then they sell it before it makes any revenue, and they can prove it doesn't work. Instagram. And I thought that was sort of interesting, but I think that works if you're in the entrepreneurial business of starting a small company, selling it, exiting within a year or two, and moving on to the next thing. Serial entrepreneurship. If you're in the business of building something that you want to manage for a long time, I think it requires some sense of how is this going to make money? I mean, that's not a bad question to ask when you're doing it as a career. And I always tell people the second you decided to take this from a hobby to a career, you have to think about money, because you expect to make a living off of it, and it's not a bad thing to want to make a living. And in fact, oftentimes I find that from a research perspective, when producers or other creative personnel are forced to stop and think about what the audience wants and what will actually take off, they do better work. They stop and think about, ooh, could I go this way? And they get more creative. And my favorite example of that is TMZ. I worked on that, probably the TV show launched like 3 years ago, and I remember we were saying, oh gosh, you're trying to launch a new entertainment show into syndication when all the entertainment shows are kind of falling off in the ratings and syndication. That whole category of entertainment news was moving towards the internet, as per TMZ. And so we were thinking, gosh, this is a really tough action to take, to make a TV show in this category start and work at this period of time. When you already have 5 shows like that, and E! Had a whole bunch of shows in that category as well, on cable. And so we did some research to figure out what's the right position. If you're going to do this, how do you position it? And the 3 words we came up with, and we did a ton of research to boil it down to 3 words: real, funny, different. And it was fascinating because we didn't tell them how to do real, funny, different. We told them where the boundaries were. So different can't be you're on somebody's front lawn. That's too invasive, You cannot get to the point where people are watching through their fingers saying, I'm embarrassed for this. That is too much. That may actually work online. It doesn't work on TV because women are going to drive your audience, and they hate that. So you can't do that on TV. It can't be invasive. You have to set paparazzi boundaries. And they're actually surprisingly good at that, which is sort of interesting. And somehow it has to be different than Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood and all these shows that are already on air. So what are you going to do to make this a little different and maybe keep it within a better budget? And then your brand is funny, so make it funny. And that, by the way, that's a way to be different. So what was fascinating to me was how they came up with what to do for real, funny, different. So real was sort of that finding people in public places, airport shots kind of thing. Funny, they introduced voiceover, so they narrated it in a way that other shows aren't doing, and like funny graphics and stuff like that. But the different was my favorite part. What they did to be different also solved a problem we had, which is people hate paparazzi. And they made the newsroom the stage, And I was like, bow down in brilliance, it was genius. I was like, you made all the people everyone wants to hate behind the scenes the stars of the show. So you don't hate them, And you didn't have to hire hosts. It made it different. It made it more real because it's in the newsroom, so it's not on this set with artificial interviews. And you basically, that one decision delivered on all 3 parameters, And so that's the thing to be. I always look for organizations that can, when you push them to say, hey, you have to do this or your show or your video isn't going to succeed, they'll come up with something more creative that blows people's minds, And I always think that's my favorite example of a client that did that had a huge challenge and used that challenge to their advantage.
I've been watching TMZ because I've been really fascinated with the change that's been going on with their show, and it's just been amazing to me because I think Harvey, as crazy as he is, he's a genius in terms of what they're doing, and now they've gone to the live show.
Yeah, online, yeah.
Yeah, and what you don't want to happen and what I don't want to see happen. I watch them because they are different. I try to say, no, don't turn to TMZ.
That's why it works.
What I like about it is different from
Mhm.
And I just see really wonderful things happening with that show.
Yeah, they're really smart. You
Oh,
know,
I have a problem with the voiceovers though.
Yeah, they can
They're
get
all wacky
snarky.
and out there. I just
Yeah.
need to clean it up a little bit.
well, and I think to some degree, and that's where they sort of test it out there and see what works. They were part of the way they would try to be different is to find a little bit different of an audience. So instead of being most entertainment news shows skew somewhere from 60 to 70% female, they were trying to figure out, can we do a 50-50 show, which requires being a little snarkier to get the guys in. So, and that can alienate some women. So it's about finding the balance, and I think it's a constant treadmill to try to sort of figure out where that is.
I think they're doing a fantastic job.
But the other thing that show did that I thought was really clever, and actually they do it online too, is they built it like a newsroom. I mean, and I remember somebody asking me about, I was working with a video portal called Young Hollywood. I don't know if any of you guys know it. It was a partner of my last employer. And they do production of a lot of behind the scenes celebrity interviews and that kind of thing. And they have a portal, but they also syndicate it out, I believe, through Yahoo. And one of my colleagues at some point asked me, like, how do we make Young Hollywood like TMZ? Like, you want to go there every day. And I was like, you have to turn it into a news website. I'm like, TMZ is fundamentally a news organization. Whether or not you think it's credible, that's your opinion, you know? But they're a news organization. They are owned by Warner Brothers, which vets everything and has a legal team that is not going to let false news go to air. And it's a whole other business model than this, which is fun, celebrity interviews, longer form content. You know, it's a completely different business from that, you know, in that regard.
TMZ is very rarely wrong.
They can't be.
Very rarely.
Yeah.
When Michael Jackson broke, I mean, they were
Yeah.
exactly right on every single point of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what broke TMZ really was that credibility of getting that story first and correct. Opened it up to people to think of them as a news organization. Yeah, but they always were. I mean, they were literally structured from day one to be a news organization, which is fascinating.
So if women are driving TV and women want to stay away from the yuck, why so much yuck in reality?
It's interesting. So there's two types of, in my experience, two types of reality viewers. There are the people who like more like the competition, happy, you know, realization of dreams kind of reality. So that's like American Idol and all those kind of shows. And even Project Runway, kind of, even if it does have its moments of over the top, ultimately it's about pursuing your dreams. You know, it's funny, I work with Kristen, who used to be my client, on that exact question of, you know, what is it about Project Runway that draws you in? And there were the people that were like, it's fun, it's over the top, it's campy, it's exciting, you know, it's dramatic. And then there are people like, at the end of the day, these are all people like going after their dreams, and some, you know, and that's really cool to watch. So there's that whole world. Then there's the world that likes to watch the over-the-top reality. And it's interesting because when you ask them, they watch it because it makes them feel better about their own lives. That's the number one reason they'll tell you. It's like, oh, it just puts my problems in perspective because my friends aren't this ridiculous. Nobody like would throw a drink at me in my circle of friends. Nobody would scream at me. And it's just, to them, it's not reality. It's completely over the top. They actually assume that it's produced. They assume that these people are being encouraged to do this stuff. In fact, oftentimes they're not. They often, I think viewers assume a greater level of producer intervention than actually exists, which is part of the fascination of it. But they know that it's not the norm, and that's part of what they like about it, is that it's a break from my mundane reality of life. It's over the top. At least my problems aren't this extreme, and my group and my family aren't this extreme. And so there's that sort of aspect. I will say there's a subset of that just likes drama, you know, and drama can be scripted or it can be unscripted. It doesn't really matter. They like dramatic conflict. It's just something that speaks to them. You actually see that a lot in movie programming as well. There's sort of things that are sort of tear-jerking things. The same people who like the tear-jerking dramatic movies tend to like the over-the-top reality as well, which may not be intuitive, but it's definitely a pairing that can work.